Thank you, Graham. Well, ladies in the audience, I simply cannot compete with Mauro's attractive Italian accent, so I'll do my best with what I call an Aussie accent. This address today represents a welcome opportunity to put forward the long overlooked value of rural market manufacturing, its role and its contribution to regional life. In focusing on the Wheatbelt, we are focusing on agriculture, this state's other primary industry, albeit there is a significant smattering of mining dotted among the predominantly grain-growing and grazing areas which comprise it. So it is that the production of food can be described as the mainstay of this vast region, and it involves a dependence on supply infrastructure for the goods and services necessary for production. Infrastructure also needs to exist for outputs, although this mainly involves storage, handling and transport for grain and wool, along with sheep and cattle either to a port for live shipping or to regional abattoirs. However, outputs infrastructure is generally less complex than the myriad factors involved in inputs, although following Andrew Minchelli's presentation, I'm not so sure. Western Australia can boast of an impressive history of vibrant and resourceful suppliers who grew with the industry and innovatively provided solutions to problems and difficulties as they arose, and from this grew our reputation for self-reliance. So where is it now? The vast bulk of homegrown manufacturers of agricultural equipment have been displaced by imports, and the supply chain has largely shrunk to the need remaining for dealerships in rural areas to channel these foreign designed and made goods to the end user while providing pre- and post-delivery servicing requirements. Now we get to the point. Our remaining manufacturing resources have become targeted at niche requirements. In other words, the global manufacturers have picked the eyes out of this country's equipment needs and left us catering for the remnants, but they had not anticipated the lingering quality of self-reliance. Burdened by the reality that American, Canadian and European equipment suppliers can often export finished farming implements, for example, to Australia for not much more than the homegrown manufacturers must pay for the steel alone, we must accept that we have lost the volume race. It is inarguable that major capital goods such as tractors and combine harvesters would always be globalised. However, it also remains true that foreign-built implements cannot be designed for optimum performance in specific conditions and must therefore aim at an average of the conditions likely to be found in global markets. This represents the Achilles heel, which local manufacturers have been able to exploit in providing for the extra margin of productivity and profitability able to be given by the products specifically designed for local conditions, which cannot be met by the imported versions. Indeed, the Canadians caught Australian manufacturers napping when the traditional soil preparation techniques involved in sowing crops began to give way to direct drilling back in the early 1980s, once herbicide weed control became an attractive alternative to conventional tillage methods. Farmers soon saw the need for seeding implements fitted with much stronger tines, which would enable crops to be sown directly into uncultivated soil and therefore preserve valuable moisture in our challenging dryland farming conditions. Our market was flooded with imports of the implement designs farmers were looking for, and lamentably, a great deal of our foreign exchange went Canada's way over almost a couple of decades because domestic manufacture was slow to react. In the meantime, though, this rapidly adopted new farming system was itself undergoing refinement, and with local research underpinning a greater understanding of present and future benefits, demand arose for more highly developed equipment, which saw two Western Australian manufacturers eclipse most of the imported equipment's capabilities, and so a significant portion of the market had been won back to local supply. Although these two manufacturers needed to be Perth-based because of their dependence on materials and service providers, their customers and market activity were all based in the Wheatbelt. This illustrates one of the difficulties in locating manufacture in country areas. The centralised nature of manufacturing support industries being based quite sensibly in Perth means that a regional manufacturer needing to, for example, heat treat components or have items electroplated or powder coated will need to incur freight costs to and from the provider, which has suffered to a much lesser extent by the Perth-based equivalent. Trade skills and tertiary qualified staff, such as engineers, are more readily available from Perth than can be found in country areas, and this factor further influences the centralising effect. Other Wheatbelt manufacturers, however, have been able to compete with imports in areas such as bulky goods, including field bins and grain carts, which cannot easily or economically be supplied from offshore in containerised form. Spray booms are being made and competitively marketed by several Wheatbelt manufacturers, while others are producing stock crates, sheep yards and races, crutching cradles and other husbandry products. Local innovation has led to development of production of kits for direct baling of straw behind combine harvesters, trailing self-powered units for weed seed destruction, carts for chaff collection and yet other kits for placement of chaff on controlled traffic lanes in order to isolate weed seeds from the field, all of which save enormously on herbicide costs for later control. As mentioned earlier, most manufactured goods need to be sold and serviced by regionally located dealerships. So, in addition to the rural employment offered by the country-based manufacturers, the dealers also provide work for a range of skills in the mechanical, administrative, sales and managerial roles. In many country towns, the machinery dealer or agency is the largest single employer, and their role as a conduit to the end user continues to grow as technologies come forth with increasing rapidity. The industry group which I represent, the FMIA, has as its mantra, "Without farm mechanisation, agriculture would stop." And more recently, technologies beyond mechanisation are helping farmers to progressively improve the efficiencies and yields available from their operations. Such technologies often begin here, with precision agriculture getting its start through companies such as Beeline, Rhinex, KEE and FarmScan, leading the world until they inevitably become absorbed in global supply structures to again leave us dependent on foreign interpretations of our local requirements. Satellite navigation has nonetheless provided major gains in farming efficiency by enabling techniques such as controlled traffic farming, inter-row shielded spraying, yield monitoring, variable rate applications of nutrients and other additions, soil chemistry mapping and soon autonomous farming. While we enjoy these benefits from direct access to the satellite network in conjunction with the ground-based differential reference station, the data transfer capabilities in a great many areas of our agricultural regions are sadly lacking due to the inadequate coverage of mobile telephone reception. Unfortunately, a number of other very useful technologies are hobbled by factors beyond the control of manufacturers or dealers. One example is the exciting range of benefits available from telematics, whereby real-time feedback or monitoring from field operations has limited use in Western Australia because of the limitations in regional coverage of the mobile network and because the CORS system was not fully adopted outside the significant mining areas. Some other states, including Victoria and South Australia, have networks of towers giving 100% coverage, but we lag behind for reasons unknown. Another retarding factor is the availability of young, skilled or qualified people in rural areas, not only to provide succession for the ageing demographic currently holding the jobs, but also to embrace these new technologies and provide the know-how to commission, operate and maintain them. There is a misconception that universities offering tertiary studies in agricultural science, economics or management will be sufficient to meet the needs of this industry. However, when such graduates begin to apply themselves to the practicalities of a career in farming, the skills and knowledge needed to deliver theory to the ground often finds them wanting. The all-important sector of farm mechanisation languishes, with scarcely any tertiary courses available Australia-wide, Marcus Oldham College in Geelong being the only facility where farm mechanisation can be studied, while in China there is something like 6,000 agricultural engineering students at any one time going through their system. This demonstrates how strongly they see the importance of food security, and it contrasts very sharply with our own position. However, the push is on with vocational skills training at agricultural colleges and with Muresk being saved from the brink and teaming with Charles Sturt University to offer tertiary studies, firstly in agribusiness management and hopefully in agricultural engineering over time. The word hopefully is used because without intellectual capacity in this discipline for the future, where will our ability be to deliver all these new technologies to the field, let alone tailoring the methods in ways which suit our local conditions? A classic example was found many years ago when lupins were introduced as an ideal legume cropping rotation for cereal growers. The focus came from the research laboratory and agribusiness sector without any consultation being sought from the mechanisation sector, and when it came to harvesting this exciting new crop, its unique crop architecture and shadow-prone seed pods exposed the erroneous assumption that existing machinery would cope. With disastrously sub-economic amounts of the crop being lost to the ground, it was innovation from the local manufacturers which saved this initiative from a dead end, and yet this sector still finds itself being taken for granted. Let us hope that the announcement by our Premier of some $20 million for agricultural research takes account of such examples and includes the means of delivering or applying those research outcomes. The need for this industry to act with unity of purpose is with us now, more than ever. It is also not enough that jobs for young and or qualified people exist in the agricultural areas. Sons and daughters of farmers continue to drift to the attractions of city life despite the lower job prospects there, and this is a question which must be answered: how to lure them back. According to Jack Archer, many of them do come back, but without a vibrant and prosperous range of prospects to look forward to, many will opt for life in the big smoke, doing anything that will keep them there. Now, after many years of suppressed commercial activities in all aspects of the rural sector due to drought, poor commodity prices or a mixture of both, we are beginning to see renewed optimism emerging in the bush. Media frequently refer to the FAO edicts from some years ago that the world must double food outputs by 2050 if we are to feed the estimated world population of 9.2 billion by that time. Inevitably, supply and demand will push up commodity pricing, and growers are patiently anticipating improved fortunes in the process. However, more can be done, but not without a commitment to investing financially, morally, and by demonstrated resolve, which leads to the second part of this address: the challenges and future opportunities of the Wheatbelt. Yes. The obvious one is to stop treating our agricultural produce in the same way as we do our iron ore and other mineral resources, that is, as a commodity to be exported raw. As food supply starts to feel the pressure of increased demand, we need to challenge why we should export our grain raw so that we support jobs abroad, tasked with milling, blending and processing into edible foodstuffs. Instead, we should seize upon the opportunity provided by our improved bargaining position at that time to value add these commodities by supporting processing facilities and associated employment opportunities located at the source of the raw material. A highly progressive but less obvious prospect is to look at supplementing and perhaps ultimately replacing the main source of electrical power in the Wheatbelt, being that of reticulated power from the coalfields in Muja or diesel-powered generated power in more remote locations, with power generated from an abundantly available alternative fuel source from the Wheatbelt itself, straw. For example, Ravensthorpe frequently suffers brownouts due to being so remote from Muja and being subject to variable offtake usage along the way. A small 6 megawatt power generation facility located among the large-scale farming enterprises in the area would use clean baled straw supplied by local farmers on a contracted basis, whereby stockpiles at the station would ensure continuous reliable operation, and with backup stockpiles being held by the suppliers to guard against drought risk, the district would benefit from a reliable power supply, while the farmer suppliers would benefit from the extra income stream. 2 pages. Can do. Studies made of the Wheatbelt's needs show that up to 9 of these regionally located small generators would be justified, and the benefits to the communities are enormous. Farmers supplying the straw would need to purchase extra trucks for deliveries, along with the equipment needed to bale and handle the straw. The machinery dealer shares in this benefit, as do the employees, whose numbers may swell as a result. The power station will require employees across a range of disciplines, and technology has been identified whereby 85% of the carbon dioxide in the flue gas could be bubbled through raceway ponds containing one or more species of oil-producing algae, which would consume the CO2. The continuously growing mass of algae is then harvested and centrifuged ahead of being pressed to yield the oil, which becomes a feedstock for the production of biodiesel, hence more employees. And the remaining algal cake can be pressed into pellets for a variety of uses. 1, piggery food supplement. 2, organic carbon addition for the farmer to sow with his next crop, which helps to replace some of the carbon which was removed with the straw. And 3, a basis for a blended aquaculture fish food. This would potentially allow for fish to be grown in large tanks, possibly even with salty water pumped in winter from many salt lakes in the region, which would be filleted and frozen for transport to Perth, either for consumption or export. The remains would be gristed and blended with the algal cake, again to be sown with the next crop by the supplying farmers. Employment numbers would be further increased by these spin-off businesses, and freezer trucks would also be needed to be sold and serviced by the local dealer to continue the spread of benefits. These are not off the top of the head concepts. They are already engineered and quantified project proposals which simply await the opportune time in the ever-rising cost of electricity to become viable in commercial terms, or sooner if social interests and infrastructure capacity are considered for their importance. What else could we do with all that country out there? Perhaps we are only limited by our imagination. I'll leave you with this lingering bon mot, the words of which are credited to the wonderful Audrey Hepburn. Nothing is impossible. The word itself explains it. I'm possible. I now invite Graham Cooper back to the lectern to chair the Q&A session. Thank you, Graham.